Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and welcome to every episode of SpongeBob Season 2 Reviewed. Before we get into the reviews proper, I have a few things that I'd like to say. Firstly, I use ScumBob to describe a bad SpongeBob episode. It is not specifically tied to any season. Well, not anymore it isn't. It's a term that I made up so I can use it as I see fit. If I say it's a ScumBob episode, well, I consider it a ScumBob episode. Now, if you disagree with me, that's fine. Everyone's allowed to have their opinion, and my opinion isn't word of God by any means. No, if you disagree with how I rate an episode, that is completely fine, and feel free to voice your opinion. All I ask is that you rewatch the episode before commenting on how I'm wrong. Because, well, let's face it, SpongeBob is a show that has a lot of episodes, and a lot of episodes that can blur together from time to time. And it's also a show that's been talked up a lot, with a lot of people saying, oh, well, everything in seasons 1 through 3 is great, just because, hey, it's an easy generalization to make. So, try and rewatch the episode and look at it analytically and critically, aside from nostalgically, and then tell me if you agree or disagree with me. And, again, if you disagree, that's totally cool. Opinions. And lastly, I'd like to say that SpongeBob Season 2 is a season that is really hard for me to talk about. Why? Well, I confuse it with Season 3. Yeah, see, unlike Season 1, where it had the non-digital coloring to indicate, hey, this is a Season 1 episode, Seasons 2 and 3 kind of blur a little bit in my mind. They were both released around the same time. Heck, some Season 2 episodes were even aired in the middle of Season 3, which is weird beyond belief. But anyway, it's hard to remember which are in Season 2 and which are in Season 3. So, yeah, I just thought I'd point that out. Anyway, on to the reviews. Let's start things off with episode 21A, Your Shoes Untied. SpongeBob forgets how to tie his shoes. Fun fact, this is the first appearance of the dancing sea anemone that SpongeBob watches on TV. You dog. Anyway, my favorite part is the loop-de-loop song, because really, how can it not be? I think anytime a song appears in an episode, it pretty much always steals the show. Anyway, is this episode stink like the Dutchman's sock, or is it a good episode? It is in fact a good episode. Yeah, one of the funnier things about this episode is the fact that no one in Bikini Bottom, except for SpongeBob and apparently Gary, actually wears shoes. Quite the interesting observation. There's also some great humor about being embarrassed about the simplest of things, the fact that SpongeBob apparently can't walk 2 feet in front of him without tripping over his shoes if they're not tied, a bunch of good gags, and a pretty nice way to start the season, especially with that fun musical number. Moving right along to episode 21B, Squid's Day Off. When Squidward is put in charge of the Krusty Krab, he tries to take a relaxing day off. Fun fact, SpongeBob is really good at making change. That's not easy to do. Anyway, my favorite part is Squidward's paranoia. Yeah, if characters going crazy is a theme in SpongeBob, so is characters having an insane amount of paranoia. It's also something that's really funny to watch. But, is this a good episode, or am I starting to get paranoid that Season 2 isn't going to be that good? It is definitely a good episode. Yeah, Squidward's paranoia mixed with SpongeBob constantly being cool and nothing going on is really funny. I love Squidward's overreactions and just insanity as he cannot relax because he is so worried what SpongeBob could potentially do. And the punchline at the end is just amazing. So it is definitely a great episode. Whew, man, episode 22A, something smells. SpongeBob gets halitosis, which leads him to believe that he's ugly. Fun fact, on the Season 2 DVD release, there is an audio glitch. Yeah, a line is, repeated in a wrong place, right when there's a building moving. You'll see it if you watch the Season 2 DVD release. They even point out in the commentary that it is definitely an audio glitch, and it doesn't air that way in most showings and is not intended to be there. But, of course, the highlight of this episode, that just trumps everything else in the episode, is the ugly Barnacle story. Just look at that story. Look at it. Look at it. Read it, and tell me that it is not the most amazing epic tale that has ever been told. But, is this entire episode pretty ugly? Or does it turn out to be beautiful in the end? It is a beautiful episode if I've ever seen one. Yeah, the ugly Barnacle story alone makes it a good episode, but that's not all. SpongeBob's bad breath terrorizing the town makes for some good visual gags. And there's some great word humor in there about being ugly and what it means to be an ugly person, and there's just a lot of good jokes in here, so it is a fantastic episode. Hey, move the title card to episode 22B, Bossy Boots. Pearl turns the Krusty Krab into a teen hangout. Fun fact, apparently SpongeBob doesn't know what a salad is. even though the Krusty Krab has had salads in at least Culture Shock. Anyway, my favorite part is the Krusty Krab's new names, when they're coming up with the Creepy Krab, the Killer Krab, all those things. Good naming, and some good artwork to go along with it. But is this a good episode, or does it get the boot? It is in fact a good episode. It's not great by any stretch of the imagination, there are a ton of better episodes, but this one does have a few amusing gags, and some nice story elements. Not really too much to say, but it's a good episode. Next up, we have episode 23A, Big Pink Loser. In an effort to win an award, Patrick copies SpongeBob. Fun fact, this is the second time that Patrick has worked at the Krusty Krab, and the longest of the 2 times so far. Anyway, my favorite part is Patrick failing at working. Seriously, even the most mundane tasks, Patrick will find a way to screw up. But, is this episode a loser, or does it deserve to win an award? It definitely deserves to win an award. This episode is filled to the brim with really funny gags, and it is an amazing example of how stupid humor can be done right if done in a certain way. I think the point is not to make him so stupid that he can't do anything, just to the fact that he can't do anything correctly. He has a logic to his stupidity, like answering the phone and saying he's not a Krusty Krab. Well, yeah, he's not a Krusty Krab. He's not thinking that it's the name of the restaurant. We'll go into this later when it comes to the episodes where Patrick is so stupid that he brings the entire thing to a crawl, just for some really mind-numbingly stupid gags. But as it stands, this episode is absolutely fantastic. Happy Leif Erikson Day! It's episode 23B, Bubble Buddy. SpongeBob and his bubble pal annoy the citizens of Bikini Bottom. Fun fact, Leif Erikson Day is a real holiday. Who knew? Anyway, my favorite part is when SpongeBob and Bubble Buddy are on the beach, and SpongeBob tells Bubble Buddy to shake his bubble butt, but the health nuts at the beach think that he's talking about them and insulting them, and it's actually really funny. But does this episode fit into the bubble of good episodes, or the bubble of bad episodes? Actually, it's on the bubble of both, meaning it's a meh episode. Yeah, I thought long and hard about this one, guys. I really felt bad about calling this episode meh, because, hey, Bubble Buddy, it's classic, right? Well, actually, not really. Yes, the Leif Erikson Day thing is really funny and really memorable for whatever reason, but the rest of the episode is just really irritating. Because if you slice it as Bubble Buddy being animate, well then Bubble Buddy did such horrendous things as let Scooter die and waste hours of people's lives by spending time in the bathroom, and if Bubble Buddy is inanimate, well then SpongeBob is just being a jerk and annoying everyone all day to indulge in his fantasies. Of course, Bubble Buddy is animate, but that doesn't really make too much sense, and the entire episode, like I said, just boils down to SpongeBob and Bubble Buddy, who doesn't speak until the end of the episode, annoying everyone, and not in any sort of clever way. It's just really frustrating to watch and not particularly funny. I hate to say it, but it is a meh episode. It's only saved by the Leif Erikson Day bits and a few funny gags here and there. Episode 24A, Dying for Pie. When Squidward thinks he accidentally poisoned SpongeBob, he tries to give him a great last day of life. Fun fact, Mr. Krabs has seen this happen 11 times. My favorite part? SpongeBob's gifts for Squidward. I mean, how sad is it that he cries him a sweater of tears? But is this episode as sweet as pie, or is it as gross as, fruitcake? It is as good as pie. Yeah, watching Squidward have to give in to SpongeBob's whims and smile while doing it is pretty funny, especially considering how weird SpongeBob is. Also, and this is a small detail, but at the final scene when they're at sunset, watch the shadows very carefully. They are meticulously animated and they look really nice. Surprisingly so, even for a SpongeBob episode. Episode 24B, Imitation Krabs. Plankton impersonates Mr. Krabs using a robot in yet another attempt to get the Krabby Patty secret formula. Fun fact, Plankton once again says, "I went to college." And see, I can actually spell it this time. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob not knowing RoboKrabs is fake. I like to think of it as not SpongeBob being insanely stupid, but SpongeBob being so trusting of Mr. Krabs that even when things seem incredibly off, he still will blindly follow him. But, is this a good episode of SpongeBob, or just a cheap imitation? It is in fact a good episode. Yeah, there's some funny robot jokes, Plankton is really funny in this episode as usual, and like I said, SpongeBob not knowing Robo-Krabs is actually a robot is pretty dang funny. Let's inch on over to episode 25A, Wormy. The citizens of Bikini Bottom are terrorized by a butterfly. Fun fact, the butterfly close-up is actually a horsefly. Yeah, seriously. It's not an actual butterfly. And my favorite part, of course, is that horsefly close-up. I mean, seriously, it is pretty dang funny to see that horrifying face on what you think is just a harmless butterfly. But when people see this episode, do they run screaming? No, it is a good episode. The fact that everyone in Bikini Bottom is terrified by a butterfly of all things is good comedy right there. Just some good bits, some good paranoia and fear, and it's a good example of how even if something is as harmless as a butterfly, if it is unknown and foreign to you, it can be terrifying. Episode 25B, Patty Hype. SpongeBob opens a stand to sell colored burgers. Fun fact, Patrick invented inflatable pants. Yeah, you all thought it was SpongeBob that invented inflatable pants? Nope, that was Patrick from this episode. Yeah, it's really weird seeing it after not seeing it for a while because that part of the episode isn't particularly memorable, but considering they make an entire episode later on pretty much dedicated to inflatable pants, it's a little bit weird to see here. Also, there's a rather delicious and horrible for you candy based upon this episode. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob's plan for the money. I mean, in fairness, they tried burning it and they tried burying it. Really, all you can do is just give it away. But is this episode as good as the patties that SpongeBob makes, or as bad as the patties that Mr. Krabs makes? It is as good as the patties that SpongeBob makes. This is a really fun episode. Although I do have a few interesting qualms with the episode. For instance, Patrick just disappears. Like, seriously, he disappears from this episode. He's there, and then he's not. It's kind of weird. Anyway, it's also strange that it doesn't show SpongeBob making these patties, or Mr. Krab making these patties, or anywhere that they would make these patties. These patties just seem to spontaneously erupt from nowhere, but of course I'm nitpicking, and this is a really good episode. Put on your anti-kiss shield because it's time for episode 26A, Grandma's Kisses. SpongeBob's grandmother embarrasses him. Fun fact, this is the first appearance of, well, SpongeBob's grandma. My favorite part is SpongeBob and Patrick trying to be adults. But, is this episode as sweet as a grandmother's kiss? Or as sour as your friends finding out that your grandmother kissed you? It is a good episode. Yeah, there's a lot of funny bits in here, and it only gets funnier the older you are. Seriously, as a kid I didn't know what a tax exemption was. As an adult, I do, and I find it really funny. Especially the bit about the sideburns and just everything that SpongeBob and Patrick do. There's a lot of good gags in this episode, and again, it's one of those that gets better the older you are. But that's not to say you won't enjoy it as a kid either. It's an all-around good episode. Pack your bags because we're gonna move to episode 26B, Squidville. Squidward moves to a community where everyone is just like him. Fun fact, this is the second time Squidward tries to move. He actually succeeds this time. My favorite part? The boredom sequence. But is this episode really boring? Or is it as entertaining as your reef blower? It is even more entertaining than your reef blower. This is a seriously fun episode that answers the question, why doesn't Squidward just move away? And it also kind of gives some insight in the fact that, yeah, Squidward kind of needs some craziness in his life or else he'd just be another bored, stuck-up loser. It's a fun episode with some fun gags. Although I do have to point out, SpongeBob and Patrick are a little bit racist. I mean, seriously, they couldn't tell Squidward apart from the rest of the squids, or octopuses. Why are they octopuses? They only have 6 arms. Whatever. Either way, it is a good episode, and that was just a minor nitpick. Get ready to get extreme, because we're on to episode 27A, Prehibernation Week. Sandy drags SpongeBob into doing a bunch of extreme sports. Fun fact, this episode features heavy metal music by the band Pantera. Did I say that right? I don't know. I'm not really into heavy metal music. Anyway, the music actually does suit the episode really well. My favorite part are the extreme sports themselves. They are hilariously dangerous, and Sandy seems absolutely insane in this episode. But, is this episode extremely good or extremely bad? It is in fact extremely good. Yes, with all the extreme sports being really funny, interesting, and varied, as well as SpongeBob being terrified of what Sandy is going to do to him next, to the really funny ending. It is a funny episode through and through, and as I said, the metal music definitely complements it. Hide your candy bars, because we're up to episode 27B, Life of Crime. SpongeBob and Patrick believed to have committed a terrible, terrible crime. Fun fact, when Patrick acknowledges the fire, it goes out. You gotta love cartoon logic. Anyway, my favorite part is definitely the candy bar scene. But, did this episode steal my heart in the metaphoric way that I think it's funny and awesome? Or did it steal my heart in the means of that I actually need that heart to live and it's going to kill me, it is just that bad? It is in fact a really good episode! From Mr. Krabs being the one to teach them that it's not stealing, it's just borrowing, to the fact that it's a balloon that they think they stole, to the fact that it was actually a free balloon that they think they stole, to them getting paranoid that each other is a bigger thief. It is just a really good episode all around, and really funny. Hoo hoo hoo, deck your halls, because we're up to episode 28 SpongeBob. Christmas who? SpongeBob tries to bring Christmas to Bikini Bottom. Fun fact, this is the first time there is a theme song variation. They use bells and reword it to be a little bit about Christmas. But my favorite part is definitely Drunk Santa. Seriously, you watch Santa in this episode, and you try and tell me that he's not drunk or, I don't know, on some kind of special medication or something, the way he's flopping his hat around. That always gets a laugh out of me. Before we review it, let's talk about the patchy segments. Episode 28P, the SpongeBob Christmas Special. Patchy tells a tale of SpongeBob's first Christmas while preparing his own house for Christmas. Fun fact, Patchy is played by Tom Kenny. Yes, the voice actor of SpongeBob and Gary. My favorite part, Patchy and Potty in general. Seriously, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that they're trying to parody some kind of low-budget kids' educational show or something like that. But these two are really funny and just really weird. But is the entire episode as a whole a holly jolly happy holiday episode, or is it a nightmare before Christmas? It is a holly jolly good episode. Yeah, they do a lot of funny Christmas gags, and what I really like is that the story itself isn't just another Christmas carol or something similar, which would have been really easy to do considering they already have a curmudgeon. Either way, it's a fun and interesting story, they definitely use the Christmas setting well, and it is just a good episode. Although on a side note, Sandy really disappears from this episode. Seriously, she is very crucial in telling SpongeBob about Christmas, and then she just completely disappears from the plot whatsoever. You think she'd be there to reinforce what he's saying. She's just there to teach him about Christmas and then, I don't know, hibernate? Well, either way, that's a minor nitpick, and this is a good Christmas special. Speaking of hibernation, it's 29A, Survival of the Idiots. SpongeBob and Patrick get trapped in Sandy's dome during a snowstorm. Fun fact, this episode is a sequel of sorts to Prehibernation Week, in that it's about hibernation. Yeah, there's not too much of a connecting force there, but either way, my favorite part is Dirty Dan and Pinhead Larry. I don't know who came up with that, but it just works really well here and is really funny that Sandy's obsessed with Texas outlaws while sleeping. But is this episode as bad as Dirty Dan, or is it as good as experiencing snowfall for the very first time? It is a good episode. There's a lot of fun set pieces here, from Sandy being absolutely insane when she's sleeping, to Dirty Dan and Pinhead Larry, to SpongeBob and Patrick just having fun in the snow. There's a lot of fun things about the episode, and it's just a good episode, overall. Episode 29B, Dumped. SpongeBob gets jealous when Gary starts spending a lot of time with Patrick. Fun fact, Gary purrs like a cat, because Gary pretty much is a cat. Because snails are cats. SpongeBob is weird. Anyway, my favorite part is Gary playing with Patrick. But, should I dump this episode in with the good ones or the bad ones? Well, actually, it's gonna go with the meh episodes. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I really wanted to give this one a good episode moniker, but for the life of me, I couldn't really remember any jokes that were particularly funny. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad or anything, it's nice to watch, it's quite an interesting story, and there are a few gags that kinda work, I suppose, but nothing is really that funny. And compared to the other episodes in the season, wow, is this one just missing something? So, yeah, meh episode all around. Vroom vroom, episode 30A, No Free Rides. Mrs. Puff passes SpongeBob in an effort to finally get him out of her class. Fun fact, there's this picture when Mrs. Puff enters SpongeBob's parents' home. That's a picture of her entering the home, and in that is a picture of her entering the home. It's this really weird paradoxical picture that's there for, I don't even know what the purpose is. It's not even used in a joke. It's just this weird optical illusion, infinity paradoxy thing that's just there. But my favorite part of the episode is SpongeBob's essay. What he learned in Bodhi School is blankety, blankety, blank. But does this episode get a passing grade? Yes it does. There's just a lot of good humor here and some fun animation in that car scene at the end. Meep, meep, episode 30B, meep, 30B, 30B. I'm your biggest fanatic. SpongeBob tries to impress a snobby group of jellyfishers. Fun fact, this is the first, and to my knowledge, only appearance of Kevin. My favorite part, Kevin repeatedly getting stung. But, is this episode as sweet as jellyfish jelly? Or does it sting as much as a jellyfish sting? It is a good episode. I like how they set up this character who is a real jerk, and then just have him repeatedly get tormented, completely accidentally, by SpongeBob. It's nice to see that it's not Squidward for a change, but it really works here. There's a lot of good gags, and just a fun episode in general. Episode 31A, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, number 3. SpongeBob and Patrick try to rehabilitate a supervillain. Fun fact, Man Ray is a parody of Aquaman villain Black Manta. My favorite part, Patrick's wallet. Well, maybe it's not his wallet. I'm not entirely sure. But, did this episode fake its way through, or did it make me laugh more than having a tickle belt? It made me laugh because it is a really good episode. Once again, SpongeBob and Patrick stupidly tormenting someone who honestly deserves it is a really funny formula. Also, much like Plankton, Man Ray is an over-the-top, hammy, evil character. And he's what really shines in this episode. He pretty much carries the episode. There's even portions of it where SpongeBob and Patrick just aren't even there. And it's just a Man Ray that we follow. He's a really funny character and a nice parody of a supervillain. Hey guys, you want to hear a joke? Might be a little off color. Episode 31B, Squirrel Jokes. SpongeBob tells insulting squirrel jokes. Fun fact, this is the second time the Krusty Krab has had a stage since Culture Shock. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob's routine. It is just a nice little parody of a stand-up routine that is a little bit racist. But, is this episode as dumb as a squirrel, or is it as funny as a squirrel joke? It is as funny as a squirrel joke. In addition to being pretty funny, the episode also has a pretty nice message in that, yeah, it's okay to poke fun at yourself and your friends every once in a while, just don't do it too much and don't single in on one person. If you're gonna make fun of someone, you might as well just make fun of everyone. But aside from that, the episode is genuinely funny and pretty clever for a kid's show. Although I will have to say, I do remember the jokes being funnier when I was a kid. Ah, well, the entire point of SpongeBob kind of being racist is funny in and of itself, and yeah, I'm counting this as a recurring theme. Next up, episode 32A, Pressure. Sandy competes with her undersea pals to decide whether sea creatures or land creatures are the best. Fun fact, when on dry land, the sea creatures turn into puppets on sticks. Yeah, that's a weird way to portray it, but hey, they did it. My favorite part is the sea creature talents, i.e. what Squidward, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs can do that Sandy cannot. But, is this a good episode, or did it fold under pressure? It is in fact a good episode. It's just a fun little plot with a lot of good visual humor. There's not really much to say, but it is definitely a fun episode. Episode 32B, The Smoking Peanut. SpongeBob believes he has upset a performing oyster. Fun fact, Clemu is a reference to Shamu, because that wasn't obvious. Anyway, my favorite part is Patrick's ice cream. I don't know why, but every time I see that scene, I think that Patrick's actually licking SpongeBob. It fools me every single time. But, is this episode guilty of being a bad episode? Or is it as good as a performing oyster? It is as good as a performing oyster. It may not be the funniest of episodes, but it definitely has some jokes that work really well. And the story itself is actually pretty nice, even if it is a little bit like Life of Crime if you think about it. Either way, it is a nice story with enough really awesome laughs in there sprinkled about, even if it's not laugh out loud funny all the time. Also, both twists at the end are actually really good twists that I didn't see coming upon first airing. And they both really make sense and were foreshadowed in the beginning. Well, at least one of them was. Either way, it is a nice story, perhaps one of the better dramatic stories, quote-unquote, that SpongeBob has ever told. Next up, we have episode 33A, SpongeBob, Shanghaied! SpongeBob and Patrick are forced to be the Flying Dutchman's crew. Fun fact, this is the first episode to be longer than 11 minutes, yet shorter than 22. Yeah, without the patchy segments, or with the truncated patchy segments, as we'll get into in a minute, the episode does not quite reach 22 minutes. But it's definitely longer than your average 11-minute episode. As such, the next episode, the B episode to this, Gary Takes a Bath, ends up being considerably shorter. My favorite part of the episode? The perfume section. Because who honestly saw that coming? And the entire scene is just absolutely laugh-out-loud, over-the-top funny. Anyway, let's move on to the patchy segments. Episode 33A, Patchy, You Wish. Patchy, I guess he does something. Yeah. Fun fact, there are two versions of the Patchy segment. There is one version that only aired the very first time this episode aired, where Patchy hosts a segment in which kids could vote on the ending of the episode. There was a contest to see if kids wanted SpongeBob, Patrick, or Squidward to get the wish at the end of the episode. It just basically changes the last punchline of the episode, and SpongeBob's won in the US, and the rest of them can be seen in various places and have aired in various places. Honestly, I didn't find any of the punchlines to be really that funny. But either way, that was Patchy's original purpose, to host this call-in voting thing. Since the episode has aired in reruns and on the official Season 2 DVD release, unfortunately, they decide to nix this part in favor of having Patchy... I don't really know why he's there. Why not just remove him from the episode entirely? What they do is they dub over his voice with stuff that doesn't match his lips, like, at all, and it just basically amounts to one or two gags, and Patchy saying, "Here's a cartoon I like!" and rolling the episode. It really doesn't make sense that it's still there. Either leave it in originally, just, without the phone number, or absolutely get rid of it instead of giving us this weird truncated version. It is worth noting that the original episode in its original form, minus the phone number, is actually on the first 100 episodes DVD, which I really don't want, considering I already have the first 4 seasons, so why would I buy the first 100 episodes? But regardless, that is the only way to see the episode as it originally aired, and as such, since it is commonly seen in this form, I am reviewing the episode as it is, with this weird, bizarre, patchy segments. My favorite part is Patchy in the canon, mostly because there's really not much else to it. But, does this episode deserve to walk the plank? No. Even with the awkward Patchy segments, the episode is still really funny. There are a lot of gags jammed in there, and actually I was surprised to find out that it was longer than 11 minutes. Because, really, the episode flows pretty nicely, and it's got a lot of really good gags. The patchy bits are indeed awkward, but at least they keep them really short in the truncated version. As far as how they were in the original, I can't even remember. So, yeah. Good episode with a lot of funny gags. Also, some really nice animation and some creepy imagery when it comes to the Fly of Despair. Episode 33B, Gary Takes a Bath. SpongeBob tries to give Gary a bath. He doesn't actually end up succeeding, so the title is a total lie. Fun fact, this episode aired in 2003 between 2 Season 3 episodes. Yeah, most of Season 2 aired in 2001, with a little bit airing in 2002. Yeah, I understand why they didn't air it originally, because, as I said, when Shanghaied was first aired, the patchy segments did fill up the full 22 minutes, and I guess Shanghaied didn't air too much afterwards. But, for whatever reason, they waited that long until letting go of Gary Takes a Bath. My favorite part of the episode? The doubloons joke. I didn't get it as a kid, but I get it now, and it might be one of the dirtiest jokes ever told in SpongeBob. No, I'm not going to explain it further. All I'm going to say is that SpongeBob is indeed a dirty boy. But, is this a good episode or a bad episode? It is most definitely a good episode. Yeah, it's not very long, and it just consists of SpongeBob and Gary, and a brief cameo by Mr. Krabs. The entire episode is done with Tom Kenny voice acting everything. There's just a lot of rapid-fire gags, a lot of really weird gags in there, and it's fun to see SpongeBob get really frustrated with Gary. And it's fun to see that Gary wins in the end, too. So there's a lot of really good gags, and it's a fun and simple plot. Next up, 34A. Welcome to the Chum Bucket. After Mr. Krabs loses a bet, SpongeBob has to work for Plankton. Fun fact, Robot SpongeBob is reading SpongeBob comics. Yeah, if you look really closely on the picture, you can see little sort of images of Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick. My favorite part, as I said before, and I will say numerous times, if there is a random musical number in a SpongeBob episode, it will almost always steal the show. Yeah, this kitchen is not the same without you, and this episode would not be the same without it. But, is this episode like working at the Chum Bucket, or is it like working at the Krusty Krab? Well, not like working at the Krusty Krab is really that good if you get down to it. You don't get many bonuses, and when you start working there, you have to pay the boss. Analogy lost. Either way, it is a good episode. Yeah, the music number's fun, and it's fun to see SpongeBob just kind of be snarky for once. We don't really get to see him be that way. And we get more of Plankton and his sci-fi robots and stuff, and overacting, which is always a pleasure. Episode 34B, Frankendoodle. SpongeBob creates an evil counterpart with a magical pencil. Fun fact, there's a drawn-to-life game based on this episode. I've never played it, but it looked pretty decent. Anyway, my favorite part is the pencil duel. But, was this idea only good on paper? No, it is indeed a good episode. I don't know what it is, but SpongeBob and Patrick messing around with this magical pencil is really fun to watch. It's cleverly written, I like the twist at the end, and the pencil duel is really fun, as well as all the gags that they're able to do with being able to spawn anything that you could imagine into this world, and an evil counterpart who can do the same. Which makes this episode incredibly strong in the story department, as well as being seriously funny. There are a lot of really good jokes here, a lot of nice wordplay and visual humor with what the characters can draw. It's fun stuff, and definitely a good episode. Psst, you wanna know a secret? Episode 35A, The Secret Box. SpongeBob wants to know what's in Patrick's secret box. Fun fact, SpongeBob is a little bit naive. Although it's more interesting the fact that he actually knows he's a little bit naive. Anyway, my favorite part is the twist ending, because really, I never saw it coming, and it is insanely clever, because it works on the level of Patrick being stupid enough to have his secret being a piece of string, but also the fact that SpongeBob maybe should have investigated a little bit more and given Patrick just a little bit more credit. But, is this episode secretly a bad episode? No, of course not. It is very much a good episode. This is one of those great episodes, and it's such a simple conflict. A character has a secret, and the other character just has to know. It's not really complicated. There's not too much to it. It's just a character has this, and a character wants that. It's a lot of fun deception gags, and a lot of fun gags related to what's in the box, why Patrick can't show anyone, related to secrets. There's a lot of fun stuff in general. And not only is that ending awesome, but it was even foreshadowed. Yeah, when SpongeBob replaces himself with the box in Patrick's hand toward the end when he's trying to steal it, Patrick opens up SpongeBob's mouth and then pulls his tongue as he would pull the secret string. Yeah, so isn't that cool? And on that note, it seems to be a mystery as to what photograph we're actually talking about here, but I have a guess, although I can't really prove it. He says it's an embarrassing photo from the Christmas party. Well, I'm not entirely sure if you can consider it a party, but the only Christmas episode we've seen of SpongeBob's up until that point, Squidward does take a picture of SpongeBob when SpongeBob is looking seriously depressed after Santa doesn't arrive. SpongeBob looks really sad, and it's not often we see him like this. So for SpongeBob, it could be really embarrassing. So maybe that's the picture. Or more likely, it's just some random embarrassing picture from some episode we didn't see. I like the fact that they do actually reveal what's in the secret box instead of having it be in no ending, but they don't quite reveal what it is, still leaving it to be a little bit of a secret. I've rambled on way too long about this, but needless to say, it is a fantastic episode. Next up, episode 35B, Band Geeks. Squidward tries to turn the Bikini Bottom Citizens into a band to show up his rival. Fun fact, this is the first appearance of Squilliam Fancy Son. My favorite part, do I have to say it? Anytime there is a random music number in SpongeBob, it usually steals the show. It is still an awesome song combined with the awesome visuals they give us for a really awesome climax. But, is the entire episode awesome? Yes, it is. This is one of the best episodes of SpongeBob ever, and in fact, we seem to hit a row of episodes that are really fantastic. I love this episode. It's just so great. There's a lot of good humor, And I like Squidward as a sympathetic hero here. He's not really trying to hurt anyone, he's not really being a grump, he's just someone who really is trying hard and just cannot succeed. And he has this rival who did succeed, breathing down his neck the entire time. Not to mention that most of the main characters are in this episode playing awesome instruments, and the entire episode plays out like some sort of weird 80s movie, where there's your snobby, over-the-top rival, there's a fight scene, there's an inspirational speech, there's pulling it off at the end, even though really they had no reason or means to do so. It's just a really awesome setup, a really awesome plot with a lot of awesome humor, and that ending payoff, again, even if it really doesn't make any sort of sense that they can all play like this, is just wonderful. Episode 36A, Graveyard Shift. Squidward and SpongeBob get spooked out by a scary story while working at night. Fun fact, Nosferatu is actually from an old horror movie. Yeah, growing up you might have been confused with that gag, as I was, but he's apparently from, like, some movie from the 20s where they couldn't actually get the rights to Bram Stoker's Dracula, so they kind of made a knockoff of vampires, and they called them Nosferatus, or something along the lines of that. Yeah, that gag was always weird. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob doing things at night. But does this episode make me want to turn off the light? No, it is a good episode. Yeah, there's a lot of really fun gags here, and they actually do a nice little running gag with SpongeBob's hands, how he can regrow his arms and hands, that they don't really do in many other episodes. In fact, most of the time when SpongeBob's arms disappear, he needs to re-get them, or they just pop back on screen. But in this episode, he regrows them and eats them, and does a lot of really fun sight gags with them. I don't know why, but that part's always really memorable, and for some reason it made me think as a kid that SpongeBob could just regrow his arms, even though it was really only seen in that one episode. Not really much else to say. It's just a solid episode all around. Love is in the air. Episode 36B, Krusty Love. Mr. Krabs is torn between his love of money and his newfound love of Mrs. Puff. I love the name of this episode, by the way. Anyway, Mr. Puff was made into a lamp, is what we find out in this episode. And that's kinda dark if you think about it. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob's translation of Mr. Krabs' flirtation. But, is this episode flirting with disaster? Or flirting with someone circular-shaped? Yeah, we're talking about this. I'm making a circle right now. It's a good episode. Yeah, it's not very often we see romance on SpongeBob. In fact, it's kind of weird considering both of these people are old and have Mr. and Mrs. in their titles. Anyway, Krusty Love is a fun episode, and it's kind of interesting to see Mr. Krabs take a love of something that's not money, and to see how it can conflict. And the real-world subtext of this is actually very true. When you love someone, you might accidentally spend a lot of money on them, because, hey, doing things is expensive. It's a fun little plot, and again, we don't see romance too often, so it's kind of a refreshing change here. Episode 37A, let me do some calisthenics here. Procrastination. SpongeBob gets distracted while trying to write an essay. We've all been there, man. Fun fact, a section of this episode was cut in later airings. Yes, there's a portion of this episode where SpongeBob looks outside and sees a beautiful day outside, which is usually in the episode, but then he sees Patrick massaging Sandy, or rubbing tanning oil into her or something. But for some reason, Sandy looks like, I don't know, she looks really weird. She's not blinking and her head's tilted to the side. She looks like she's, like a creepy doll version of Sandy, to be honest, not like actual Sandy. Anyway, that part's cut, perhaps because Patrick's massaging her. I don't know. But right after that, there's also a part where SpongeBob imagines what driving would be like, and he imagines this drag racing car, or some kind of car, crashing as his fantasy. And it's really abrupt, too. He's just like, I'll get my driver's license. And then it cuts to a car crash. And then he's like, yeah, that'd be great. It's really weird, and it made me laugh out loud when I saw it on the DVD, because I honestly did not remember that. So, that's a little bit of trivia for you. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob's paranoid dream where his house gets caught on fire. Hey, remember that paranoia theme? It hasn't gone away. But, is this a good episode? Or did the creators procrastinate a little bit too long and rush it at the last minute? It is in fact a good episode. Yeah, it's really relatable to anyone who's had to write an essay but just finds it really boring, especially when there's awesome things going on outside. Add to that SpongeBob's increasing paranoia and the funny gag at the end where it was all for nothing. And it's a really fun formula for a relatable and funny episode. 37B. I'm with Stupid. SpongeBob acts dumb to make Patrick look smart in front of two complete strangers. I mean, his parents. Fun fact, this is the first time that Thomas Elf Wilson voices a named character. He'd later go on to voice the Strangler, SpongeBob's bully, and several other tough guy characters, including my favorite, Reg. If you don't know who that is, well, it's Biff Tannen himself from Back to the Future. Sorry, it's my favorite movie, so I really have to point it out that Biff does voices for SpongeBob. That's how awesome this show is. And he always does the tough guy characters, too. Anyway, my favorite part is SpongeBob's dumb act. But, is this episode acting dumb? Or is it quite brilliant? It is in fact quite brilliant. Yeah, this is a really fun one, seeing all the gags of SpongeBob acting stupid, and then trying not to act stupid, and still being called stupid, with Patrick getting the credit for everything. This is another good example of how to do idiot jokes. Patrick, he's a little bit of a jerk here, but it works in the context of the episode. He's not really mean-spirited, he's just kind of being a jerk, and being Patrick, I would believe that he completely forgot that SpongeBob was a normal functioning person and wasn't a complete idiot. But yeah, it's a fun episode with a lot of good stupid gags. And when I say stupid gags, I mean intelligently written stupid gags. Episode 38A, Sailor's Mouth. SpongeBob and Patrick discover bad words. Fun fact, Patrick calls Mr. Krabs sweaty again, which is a callback to Arg. My favorite part? SpongeBob and Patrick cursing. Seriously, SpongeBob and Patrick cursing. How awesome is that? I can't even do the thing. This is a great episode. This is a hilarious episode. Whether you're too young to even know what a curse word is, but especially if you're old enough to know exactly what curse words they're probably saying. It is really funny and really witty the way they decided to do curse words on the show. Holy, this is a great episode. Episode 38B, Artist Unknown. Squidward teaches an art class that only SpongeBob attends. Fun fact, this is the first time Squidward's last name was said on screen. It's tentacles, by the way. My favorite part, SpongeBob's art. Like, the first time he does it, and he just makes these awesome things. But, is this episode more like SpongeBob before Squidward's teachings, or after Squidward's teachings? Before Squidward's teachings, i.e., fantastic and brilliant. Yeah, this episode is really funny. I love the gags that have to do with art, especially as an artsy person myself. I love the jokes about how SpongeBob draws a circle kind of the reverse way that you draw a detailed face, and how he can just automatically carve out this beautiful statue. It's really funny and really witty, and it's also funny to see Squidward just be tormented by the fact that SpongeBob is the only one that showed up. A lot of really funny jokes in here. And all around, an artistically beautiful episode. 39A, Jellyfish Hunter. Mr. Krabs uses SpongeBob to enslave jellyfish. Fun fact, the phone scene is a reference to the movie When a Stranger Calls. You know, that infamous pick up the phone, someone's breathing heavy on the other end. My favorite part of the episode is the Hey All You People song. But, is this episode as sweet as Jellyfish... Oh, I used that one. Well, we'll forgo the witty dialogue here because there's actually something I need to discuss with you guys. Yeah, see, this is the first episode in which Mr. Krabs is the antagonist. Yes, there have been episodes like The Smoking Peanut where technically he did do a pretty bad thing and caused a lot of bad consequences and could be considered an antagonist, but in here it is very blatant. And it's actually weird because not only is Mr. Krabs the antagonist and enslaving jellyfish, but throughout the episode he's kind of a jerk to SpongeBob through and through. He's very mean-spirited here. So you could even say that this is the genesis of the future Mr. Krabs characterization. However, it is worth noting that Steven Hillenburg himself, the creator of the show, has gone on to say that, yeah, sometimes Mr. Krabs is an antagonist, almost to the lengths of Plankton, because he is a greedy person, and that is not good in the long run. So, I do have to judge this episode harshly because it's one of the first shining examples of Mr. Krabs being a really awful person, and I mean pretty bad in this episode, which is probably the loophole they use to write him pretty badly in future episodes. So you think this would be a bad episode, right? Actually, guys, it is a good episode. Yes, I agree. Mr. Krabs is overboard in this episode, and I think it really hurts it to the fact that he doesn't really apologize or anything like that. He gets stung, and he's just like, okay, they're off the menu, and the episode ends. It's not like he's like, yeah, this is kind of wrong, or I'm sorry I used you, SpongeBob, I'm sorry I enslaved Jellyfish. He's just kind of like, well, they'll kill me if I keep doing this, so I won't keep doing this. It's not like he realized the error of his ways, and I think that's the difference. However, all that aside, this episode is really funny. There are a lot of really good gags. Like I said before, and say it with me this time, the music number steals the show. But even aside from that, the blue jellyfish is actually really funny, and I kind of wish old No Name would come back. Not to mention the whole scene where it feels like somebody wants to sell SpongeBob something, and a lot of other really clever gags. And for that, I can't really ask much more of SpongeBob. The plot really isn't that bad, and had they replaced Mr. Krabs with Plankton, I guess, maybe I wouldn't have these complaints in the first place, so it does kind of seem like a minor detail overall. Bottom line, it is a really funny episode, so I have to call it a good episode. But I will say that it does come with that minor asterisk of, yeah, Mr. Krabs is a little bit out of character here, and this is the episode that led them down a dark road with the character. And now it is time for episode 39B, The Fry Cook Games! SpongeBob and Patrick compete in a fast food themed competition. It's kind of like the Olympics. Anyway, this is the first time that Patrick licks SpongeBob's foot. I only mention this because it's gonna be a theme. Gross. Anyway, my favorite part are the individual events and how they're fast food themed. But does this episode take home the gold? Yes, in fact it does. There is a lot of fun events in this episode, a lot of fun visual gags. It's fun to see SpongeBob and Patrick compete with each other and go crazy and all out with it. It's just a fun concept and a fun episode. Nice and silly. Episode 40A. Well, actually, it's probably episode 40A. Yeah, for some reason, different sources list either this or Squid on Strike as 40A, and 40B. On the DVD, Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm comes 40A, with Squid on Strike being 40B, but on the list that I saw online, Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm is 40B, and Squid is 40A, but I don't think any of you really care, so why am I talking about this? Anyway, Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm. Sandy tries to hunt the dangerous Alaskan bullworm. Fun fact, this is the second time SpongeBob's house was eaten by a creature. The first time was nematodes in Home Sweet Pineapple. It's kind of strange that that's happened on more than one occasion, SpongeBob. You might want to have a more inedible house. Anyway, my favorite part is what SpongeBob wants to do with the paperclip and string. S for SpongeBob or S for Sandy. That way they know our graves. But does this episode bite? No, it is a good episode. There's not really much to say here, but it is a fun story. It's nice to see SpongeBob and Sandy try to get out of a really monstrous situation. It's also good to see Sandy, who was really cocky, get taken down a peg by this giant monster. Aside from the ending, which I found to be kind of stupid, I thought the episode was just solid all around. And now the last episode, episode 40B, Squid on Strike. Tired of Mr. Krabs' unfair policies, Squidward and SpongeBob go on strike. Fun fact, Mr. Krabs puts his dry cleaning in envelopes. For whatever reason. My favorite part is SpongeBob failing at striking. But does this episode strike me as a good one? Yes it does. It is a really funny episode. It's really funny to see how SpongeBob can just screw up striking in the most cleverest of gags. It's also nice, unlike in Jellyfish Hunter, that Mr. Krabs actually acknowledges when he goes too far and does his best to try and get Squidward and SpongeBob back. I'm also not really a fan of the part where SpongeBob destroys the Krusty Krab. Doesn't really make that much sense considering how much he loves the place. But aside from that, the episode is really solid. And that is every episode of SpongeBob Season 2 reviewed. Now let's see what the pie chart has to tell us. As you can clearly see, there were a lot of good episodes, a very small amount of meh episodes, and no ScumBob episodes. The only 2 meh episodes were episode 23B, Bubble Buddy, and episode 29B, Dumped. And I will remind you again, those episodes are by no means awful. They're just not particularly great. Statistically, compared to Season 1, this season had 1 less meh episode and 1 less ScumBob episode. Although it is thrown off a little bit by the fact that the first season had 41 episode segments, whereas this one only has 39. The first season having Reef Blower, and this season having Christmas Who, which is a 2-parter. And with all this evidence, it is blatantly clear that SpongeBob Season 2 is a good season. My favorite episodes of the season were, at number 5, Band Geeks, at number 4, Something Smells, at number 3, Frankendoodle, number 2, The Secret Box, and number 1, Sailor Mouth. I only had 2 misconceptions about this season. Firstly, I thought that classic SpongeBob, seasons 1 through 3, had really good continuity. As it turns out, it does not. No part of SpongeBob has any sort of decent continuity. Sure, there's episodes like Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy where they carry some semblance of a plot thread, but most episodes are incredibly self-contained. The methodology behind it being, you tell a joke regardless of whether it contradicts something that happens in another episode. Whatever's funny goes, and for that, it makes a really funny show, not a totally cohesive one. Want an example of what I mean? Well, let's talk about Sandy hibernating. In Prehibernation week, we see her fall asleep without eating any nuts or engorging herself, yet in Survival of the Idiots, we see her hibernating with SpongeBob not knowing what it is, and she looks stuffed as if she was eating acorns. In Bubble Buddy, she says that she's gone south for the winter, and in Christmas Who, she's around for at least a little bit of the episode, which does take place in the winter. So that's no less than 4 different stories of how Sandy hibernates. And sure, you could argue that these happened on different years, or maybe Sandy fell asleep and then woke up and stuffed herself, fell back asleep, and SpongeBob forgot. Maybe she hibernated after Christmas. You could make up excuses for why this is, but in reality, it's just the way they decided to tell stories. When you're not so concerned with what contradicts what, or if story arcs are building, you can just very easily tell some funny standalone gags. My point in bringing all this up is that a lot of people bash the later episodes, myself included, because they contradict continuity, or because they go against everything that's been said in SpongeBob, when really, guys, SpongeBob has never been good with keeping track of things. Yes, there are certain things that could happen that would be a spit in the face to earlier episodes, but let's be honest here when I say that SpongeBob has never had good continuity. And the second misconception I had was that Bossy Boots, Bubble Buddy, and a few other episodes were actually in Season 1, when obviously they were in Season 2. Why did I think this? I don't really know. Maybe they were made early in Season 2. Perhaps I just got them confused. Maybe I didn't see them originally and I only saw them when they reran in the middle of Season 2. I have no clue, just something I noticed. And because this video is already becoming really long, I only have 4 notes for the season. Firstly, there were quite a few musical guests, from Ween, who did the Loop-de-Loop song, to Panthera, who did the metal music for the Prehibernation week episode. There's just quite a few if you pay attention to the credits. I just never really realized it. Also, paranoia is a big theme, as I have said. It's just about as big a theme as characters going insane. It's really always funny to watch, and it's something that we can relate to. You just get this little itch in the back of your head. Did I leave the stove on? And from that tiny little thought grows a bunch of paranoia and worry and fear, leading you to do really irrational things. It's funny because it's relatable, and because it is another form of people going crazy, which this show is in love with. So, the My Leg gag only happened 3 times this season, and, to my knowledge, this is the last time we will see this gag for a few seasons. And it will be sorely missed. And lastly, I have to say that there is a very strange episode airing order here. Now, I guess it only applies on the DVD here because the episode production numbers don't always line up with the order that the episodes were aired. Like, Christmas Who was in between 2 episodes that weren't before and after it in production order, obviously to fit it in with Christmas, and then things like Gary Takes a Bath was aired 3 years later for whatever reason. But I do have to say, on the DVD, it is a little bit odd to see Squirrel Jokes right next to Pressure. If you don't know, both of those episodes happen to be making fun of Sandy. And it's not like it's a theme because they're not sister episodes. It's not like one is A and one is B. B of one episode and then the A of the next episode that are both thematically about making fun of Sandy. And that's about all I have to say. As always, I'd like to thank the SpongeBob Wiki for providing me with a lot of information. I'd like to thank SpongeBuddy Mania for giving me the idea to do this whole concept. And I'd also like to thank Wikimedia Commons for providing me with a lot of awesome public use images. See you guys in Season 3. PIEGUYRULZ, out.